Hey there, guys. So, I was reading through some boxing news today, and according to Kalle Sauerland, who is the promoter who is involved in the World Boxing Super Series, he claims that George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. is likely going to be in February next year, and the two venues that they've talked about are either the O2 in London or the Manchester Arena. Now, I'm really looking forward to this fight. I really am. So, it's probably a little bit early to do a breakdown video because, like I said, I mean, a venue and a date hasn't exactly been set. It's just speculation so far. But I'm going to go ahead and do it now because I'm excited about this fight. And I've been thinking about it today and about who I think is going to win and how I think it's going to go. And, thinking about fights that I've seen of these two because I follow both of these guys pretty much for their entire careers. So, these are two fighters that I've seen most of their fights, several of them live. So, just wanted to talk about this one now. It's going to be a unification. It's going to be for the WBA and IBO super middleweight titles. Of course, George Groves won his WBA title over Fedor Chudinov, who had been out of the ring for about a year and a half and was coming off a defeat to Felix Sturm. So that was pretty much a vacant title, and to be perfectly honest, guys, I don't really think that Fedor Chudinov was at his prime. I don't think he was well prepared for the fight, wasn't in his best shape. Like I said, he'd been out of the ring for a year and a half. So, I really don't take Groves that seriously right now as a world champion in the division when you've got guys like Gilberto Ramirez and David Benavidez and James DeGale and even Tyron Zoyge. I mean, at least he won his title from a reigning champion, whereas Groves didn't. So, I guess you could say, yeah, he is one of the best fighters in the division, but I don't really think he's proven that he's an elite. Or, Kalle Sauerland has been talking about Groves as being the man to beat in the division. I certainly don't agree with that. I mean, he's been beaten several times. So, but let's leave all that aside. Of course, Chris Eubank Jr. won his belt off a guy called Reynold Quinlan. Now, Reynold Quinlan was not a very good fighter, but he was a big super middleweight. He was tough. He did have power. He was coming off a knockout victory over Daniel Gill, who was a former world champion. So, he wasn't a bad fighter, but wasn't really a significant victory. But either way, Groves got the win, and he got the win in dominant fashion. I was quite impressed. I watched that fight live, and yeah, I was quite impressed with the way that Groves handled the bigger man. But sorry, not Groves, Eubank. But let's talk about this fight anyway. So, when this fight first got signed, my initial thoughts about this fight were the last thing that George Groves wants to do is get himself involved in a scrap or a brawl with Eubank Jr. And the reason I say that is because if this fight turns out to be a shootout and it turns out to be a brawl, and if Groves isn't able to get Eubank out of there in the first 5 or 6 rounds, that's going to present a problem because Eubank has shown in his most recent performances that he can rally late in fights. Okay, like if you look at his fight against Dmitry Chudinov, for example, which is, ironically, it's the brother of Fedor Chudinov, who Groves won his title from. Dmitry Chudinov was the guy who Eubank Jr. won his interim title from at middleweight. He was able to stop Chudinov in the 12th round after a very high-paced fight where he had some problems. So, clearly, Eubank has got pretty good stamina. He was able to rally late. Even against Billy Joe Saunders, he was able to win the later rounds of that fight after being outboxed early. So I think that going into this fight, Groves needs to be cautious and wary of the fact that if he gets caught up in a scrap with Eubank and doesn't get the job done, doesn't finish him off, he'll be in the exact same situation he was in the Carl Froch fight where he just couldn't get rid of him, and then Eubank will come on late and come on strong and pile on the pressure, and he'll end up just outlasting Groves and breaking him down. I could genuinely see that happening. So I think that a late round stoppage, like a round 8 to 12 stoppage for Eubank is certainly possible here. However, I thought about it a little bit more, and I understand that although Groves has had those issues in his career, like with stamina and pacing and not being able to get the job finished and whatnot, one thing that Groves has done in previous fights in the past is he has utilized feints on the outside. Like, for example, one fight that I would always use as an example is if you look at George Groves' fight against James DeGale back in 2011. Now that was a close fight. It was a competitive fight. People's opinions were split on who they think won. But one thing everyone could probably agree on is the fact that during that fight, Groves was able to use feints, a jab, and movement to completely offset James DeGale. I mean, James DeGale just couldn't find his timing in that fight. He couldn't find his balance. Going into that fight, DeGale had always been able to like deconstruct his opponents. He'd been able to walk them down and take them apart inside. That was James DeGale's style back then. He was a pressure fighter, but a skillful pressure fighter. And George Groves was able to completely take that away from DeGale by just using feints and timing and hand speed and athleticism, and he's got quite good balance, Groves, so he was able to keep that up for 12 rounds. And I think a lot of that was to do with the tactics of Adam Booth. Adam Booth was a really, really good trainer for Groves because he was always able to bring out the best in Groves. For example, when George Groves faced Kenny Anderson, he got dropped in the third round. He was losing the fight. He was having problems. He was being outmuscled at times. He was being outworked. And Adam Booth gave him the perfect motivation in the corner, the perfect strategy to get back into the fight. And he was able to get back into the fight, and he was able to stop Kenny Anderson in the 6th round. And there was some excellent body work from Groves in that fight. His body shots were excellent. And I think that going into this Eubank fight, there are certain things that Groves can exploit here, because although I think Eubank is a fantastic athlete with quick hands, good skills, decent skills, it's not really great. I don't really think he's a great skilled boxer or anything like that. I really don't see anything from Eubank that tells me that he's some kind of master tactician. He's really not. But he's a great athlete, and he's got good quick hands. He's got decent power. He throws some lethal uppercuts on the inside. He can bend at the waist. Seems to have pretty good head and upper body movement. But I think that if Groves stays on the outside, and if he's able to just use his jab, use his feints, and box to the kind of strategy that he boxed James DeGale, then we could see George Groves outbox Eubank Jr. and maybe win a decision. Now, of course, doing this, Groves is going to have to be tactically on point. He's going to have to listen to his trainer. I believe he's still trained by Shane McGuigan, who's a good trainer. However, Shane McGuigan, while being a good trainer, he's inexperienced. Now, obviously, he's learning. I mean, he had a lot of work with David Hay, who's no longer with him. He has done a great job with Josh Taylor so far. He did a lot of work with Carl Frampton, again, who's no longer with him. But I think that Shane McGuigan is going to have to really get on Groves' case here, and he's going to really have to be an authoritative figure in that corner, and he's going to have to really discipline Groves, because Groves in fights in the past, I've talked about the Carl Froch fight, where was his first fight without Adam Booth, and also the Badu Jack fight. Groves fights with his heart rather than his head, rather than just taking his time and thinking about what he's doing. He tends to just steam in there and make big mistakes. Like I can remember a fight he had once with a guy called Francisco Sierra, and although Groves had the skills to just completely dominate the guy, Groves wanted to have a scrap with him, and he ended up steaming in, getting himself cut. He had all kinds of problems in the fight, wasted a lot of energy, and it turned out to be a much tougher fight than it should have been. And that's a problem that Groves is going to have to address in his training camp for this fight. I wasn't really that encouraged by his performance against Jamie Cox. I felt that although the knockout with the body was impressive, Jamie Cox was able to kind of crowd Groves' space a little bit and make him look uncomfortable and get him to the body and push him to the ropes. And I think that if that's Eubank in there pushing him to the ropes, Groves is going to get blown away. So he's going to have to be on point, he's going to have to be tactical, and he's going to have to box to a perfect game plan. And in order to do that, he's going to have to be smart, he's going to have to be tactful, and yeah, he's going to have to listen to his corner. He's just going to have to be on point tactfully, and I think he can do it, but I'm just not sure if he will, because Groves, like I said, he fights with his heart rather than his head. He's kind of like Amir Khan in the sense that he can box, but he prefers to fight with a chip on his shoulder rather than box. And I think that if I had to make a pick in this fight, although I think Groves has the ability to outbox Eubank, I think Groves also has the power to hurt him. I'm not sure if Groves can finish Eubank early on. I'm not sure if he'll be able to, like if he gets Eubank hurt or even if he drops him. I'm not sure if he'll be able to finish him because Eubank has the better chin in my opinion, and Eubank also has very good stamina. I think that if I was to say what advantages Eubank has, he has the better stamina, no doubt. He's the better athlete. Throws. I don't know who's got the faster hands. I think Groves might have slightly quicker hands, but Eubank tends to throw more fluid combinations, like when he really lets those uppercuts go. And yeah, Eubank to me just seems a little bit more compact, a little bit stronger and more sturdy in there, more durable. Whereas Groves to me seems a little bit more fragile and a little bit more chinny. So those are his advantages, but Groves' advantage is, of course, experience. He's been in with a far better opposition. He fought Badu Jack, Carl Froch, James DeGale. He fought guys I mentioned like Sierra and Paul Smith, a lot of domestic level fighters. George Groves has faced good opposition, but I think Eubank has also faced good domestic opposition, like after the Billy Joe Saunders fight, whereas going into that fight, he hadn't fought anybody. After that fight, Eubank went on to fight the likes of Gary O'Sullivan, Dmitry Chudinov, Nick Blackwell, Reynold Quinlan, obviously Arthur Abraham, who was probably his best victory. Arthur Abraham is a veteran former world champion who is on his way out. He's past his prime, but he's still dangerous. And yeah, Eubank basically schooled him for 12 rounds. And then, of course, he went on to beat the undefeated what's his name again? Avni Yildirim, and he destroyed him in 3 rounds, took him out quickly, and Eubank's skills seem to be coming together nicely, whereas Groves, I'm not so sure. So, let me know what you guys think. I'm going to go with Eubank. I think Eubank probably going to win the fight, maybe by a late stoppage, or a decision where he really does bust Groves up late on, because I just think that the superior athleticism, the fact that he's the fresher fighter, he hasn't had, has taken as much punishment as Groves. I'm going to go with Eubank to win the fight. I could be wrong, but I do think that Groves has the ability to win the fight. I do think he can pull it off. But I've just been following Groves so long to the point where I think that he maybe kind of is set in his ways a little bit, and he'll just make the same mistakes he always makes in the ring. So yeah, I don't really have much confidence in Groves, because I picked Groves to beat Carl Froch when they were first set to fight. I thought Groves was the better fighter, but the mistakes that he made in the fight, which he really shouldn't have made, and the mistakes he made in the rematch, which was ridiculous, showed to me that just mentally he isn't the most confident fighter. He isn't confident enough to always box to a game plan. He needs a trainer in the corner like Adam Booth who's going to tell him what to do. And I think that, I don't know if Shane McGuigan really is as influential in the corner to Groves as Booth was. So I'm going to go with Eubank, probably by a late stoppage or a decision, and I'm expecting him to dominate the latter part of the fight if it goes the way I think it's going to go. So let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.